Good afternoon and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm NASA's Sandra Jones, and today we're bringing you live coverage of the undocking of a SpaceX cargo Dragon that has been docked to the space station since November 11th. Packed inside Dragon is over 4,300 pounds of research and return cargo. Teams have been keeping a close eye on weather over the past week or so as a cold front made its way through Florida, resulting in unfavorable weather conditions in the splashdown zones. But weather has since improved, and the team is targeting a splashdown tomorrow off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Teams in Mission Control Houston and in Hawthorne, California will be leading today's undocking of SpaceX's 29th cargo resupply Dragon. In Mission Control Houston, teams are being led by Flight Director Brandon Lloyd. You'll also hear the Capcom, or capsule communicator, interfering with the crew on board space station during today's operation. Today's Capcom is Jay Marshkey. Also working this operation today is the Visiting Vehicle Officer, or VVO, Sean O'Rourke. And in Hawthorne, California, the SpaceX mission manager will be leading the team in the SpaceX flight control room. Teams at SpaceX will take over Dragon's operations once it departs the vicinity of the space station through splashdown off the coast of Florida. Now, shortly after Dragon is released, it will conduct a series of undocking and departure burns, or firings, of its main engine to move a safe distance away from the International Space Station and then exit the approach ellipsoid for its return back to Earth, ending in a parachuted assisted splashdown off the coast of Florida. Dragon's journey to the International Space Station began last month on November 9th when the spacecraft launched on a Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Launch Complex 39A at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The spacecraft lifted off over the Florida coast with about 6,500 pounds of science, investigations, and supplies to begin its two-day journey to the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2. Dragon is go for undocking and departure.
Great news.
And those words up to Jasmine Mogbelli on board the International Space Station. As you heard, we are go for undock from Mission Control Houston. So again, everything looking good for a undocking today for the uncrewed Dragon resupply cargo craft. As mentioned, Dragon has been on board the International Space Station for a little over 40 days. After its launch on November 9th, it arrived to its capture point 2 days later on November 11th. Expedition 70 flight engineers Jasmine Mogbelli and Laurel O'Hara monitored the arrival from the space station's cupola. Dragon is currently docked to Harmony Forward, which is the Earth-facing side of Harmony. There's also a docking port on Harmony Zenith, or the space-facing side of the module, where the Crew 7 vehicle, the Crew Dragon Endurance, is docked to, where it has been since August. But today we are focusing on uncrewed Dragon operations. There are a couple of milestones we'll see Dragon meet this morning following the undocking command being sent. First, we'll see a series of departure burns, and then Dragon will cross through the keep-out sphere. This is an invisible line around the International Space Station, 200 meters in radius. Once Dragon exits the keep-out sphere, it will head away from the space station, and it will continue to slowly make its way further back, eventually crossing the approach ellipsoid. This is another invisible line considered to be in the neighborhood of the International Space Station. The approach ellipsoid is 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. So again, everything looking good for an on-time departure of Dragon from the International Space Station. We are targeting 4 p.m. Central for the undocking command to be sent. And once that command is sent, umbilicals will retract, and then we'll look for 2 sets of 6 hooks from the International Space Station to be released from Crew Dragon. After this, 2 short undocking burns that will last just a couple of seconds will occur, and we'll be able to see the physical separation of the vehicle at that point. This spacecraft will start to slowly drift away and then complete a few departure burns to get it into the proper position away from the space station for its eventual deorbit burn. That deorbit burn is scheduled for tomorrow morning ahead of a splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida on Friday around 11:30 a.m. There are currently 7 crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station as part of Expedition 70. Those crew members include Andy Mogensen, commander of the International Space Station from the European Space Agency, Jasmine Mogbelli of NASA, Satoshi Furukawa, flight engineer, also from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, as well as Laurel O'Hara, also from NASA, and Konstantin Borisov, Oleg Kononenko, and Nikolai Chub, all of Roscosmos. Dragon will remained attached to the International Space Station for the next few minutes before it undocks for its return to Earth tomorrow with over 4,300 pounds of research and return cargo. Among that research and return cargo are samples, hardware, and data from completed investigations, one of which is Plant Habitat 3, which assesses whether genetic adaptations in one generation of plants grown in space can transfer to the next generation. This is one of the first multi-generational plant biology studies done in orbit. Another returning study includes JAXA's, or the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's, cell gravasensing investigation, which looks at how cells sense and respond to the effects of gravity. Results could promote drug development for treating muscle atrophy and osteoporosis. Also returning on Dragon is Genes in Space 10, a student-led project that tests a method for on-orbit measurement of the length of telomeres, cap-like structures at the end of DNA strands that shorten with age but have been found to lengthen in space. Again, these are only a few of the science investigations returning to Earth on Dragon later tomorrow for further analysis and results. The International Space Station continues to serve as an essential testbed for people on Earth and in orbit as we continue to move forward, placing the first woman and first person of color on the Moon and eventually Mars.
On 2, go ahead.
Right, I will go to shut down ultrasound.
You've got that, go.
Copy, thanks.
And you just heard words up to the crew discussing a experiment being worked on board the International Space Station. The crew is getting ready to enter their sleep period, but just winding down for the evening at this point. And we are just about 3 minutes away from that undocking command to be sent to Dragon. And you're getting a view on your screen there of the SpaceX Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California. We're still in integrated operations between Hawthorne and NASA, but once Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, Hawthorne will take over the rest of the mission through splashdown tomorrow off the coast of Tallahassee. Everything continuing to look good for an on-time undocking today. Again, that command is slated to be sent at 4 p.m. Central Time. And we're getting a great view of Dragon docked to the International Space Station, just moments away from the undocking command to be sent, about 50 seconds or so. Ten seconds until the command is sent. And the undocking sequence command has been sent. Next up, umbilicals will be retracted. Everything looking good. Following umbilical retraction, we'll look for 2 sets of 6 hooks to open. At that point, we'll actually see the physical separation between Dragon and the International Space Station. Hearing good calls, all of the umbilicals have been demated successfully. And the first set of hooks is working to release. Again, there's 2 sets of 6 hooks. The first set of hooks is working to be released. After the first set of hooks has opened successfully, the second set of hooks will then open. We'll then hopefully be able to see the small firings of the engines to back Dragon away from Space Station.
Station Houston, first set of hooks open. Dragon is committed to undock.
And with that call up to the crew on board the International Space Station, the first set of hooks has successfully opened. Now we'll wait on that second set of hooks to open.
Houston, we copy.
Everything continuing to go smoothly this afternoon. At this time, the International Space Station is flying 266 statute miles off the southwest coast of Chile.
Station Houston, all hooks open.
Station copies.
Dragon separation confirmed.
And Dragon has separated from the International Space Station at 4:05 p.m. while flying off the southwest coast of Chile. You can see Dragon beginning to make its backing away from the International Space Station on your screen. And the very first of the departure burns, called Departure Burn 0, went off without a hitch, everything continuing to go really smoothly. The next burn we'll look ahead will be the second departure burn, but it is actually called Depart Burn 1. That is slated to take place in just a few minutes from now. And if you're just joining us, Dragon has just recently, minutes ago at 4:05 p.m. Central, undocked from the International Space Station. Dragon has been docked to the orbiting lab since November 11th.
Departure burn 0 complete.
Copy. Departure burn 0 complete. Great news.
And we're continuing to get some great views of Dragon as it continues to back away from the International Space Station. Next major milestone we'll look towards is when it exits the Keep Out Sphere, which is that imaginary 200-meter radius around the International Space Station. We're less than 2 minutes out from the departure burn 1. Everything looking good from here on the ground in mission control. And we're in a brief period of loss of signal between our satellite communications, but we'll regain signal here shortly. Again, if you're just joining us in this afternoon, the uncrewed cargo Dragon, SpaceX's 29th resupply mission to the International Space Station, undocked from the International Space Station at 4:05 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, just 5 minutes ago, carrying over 4,300 pounds of research and return cargo, which will splash down off the coast of Florida, off the coast of Tallahassee more specifically, tomorrow morning. And the departure burn 1 is underway. This is a 22-second long burn to help further back Dragon away from space station. And it was a good burn according to our vehicle officer.
Departure burn 1 complete.
Copy. Departure burn 1 complete.
And here shortly, SpaceX 29 will exit the Keep Out Sphere, that imaginary 200-meter radius around the International Space Station. And Dragon has exited the Keep Out Sphere. So the next major milestone we'll look ahead is when Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid. That's the 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer.
Station Houston, Dragon has exited the Keep Out Sphere. That's our last planned call to you. Have a good night.
Awesome. Copy. Thanks, Jay. And thanks to the entire team. That was a great.
And again, Dragon is outside of that Keep Out Sphere. So the next milestone will be the approach ellipsoid exit, that 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer imaginary space around the International Space Station. We're targeting that exit from the approach ellipsoid to occur around 4:24 p.m. this afternoon. And if you're just joining us this afternoon, a cargo dragon vehicle recently undocked from the International Space Station at 4:05 p.m. Central. On board is over 4,300 pounds of cargo, research, and investigations that will be returned to Earth following a splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee tomorrow morning. Among that research and return cargo are samples and hardware, as well as data from some completed investigations, one of which is the Plant Habitat 3 investigation. This investigation assesses whether genetic adaptations in one generation of plants grown in space can transfer to the next generation. This is one of the first multi-generational plant biology studies in orbit. And another study returning includes JAXA's, or the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's, cell gravisensing experiment. This investigation looks at how cells sense and respond to the effects of gravity. Results could promote drug development for treating muscle atrophy and osteoporosis. And also returning on Dragon is Genes in Space 10, which is a student-led project that tests a method for on-orbit measurements of the length of telomeres, which are cap-like structures at the end of DNA strands that shorten with age, but have been found to actually lengthen in space. Since undocking from the International Space Station about 12 minutes ago, Dragon has completed a series of departure burns lasting just a few seconds each to help further back it away from the orbiting lab, and it has since exited the keep-out sphere. The keep-out sphere is the imaginary 200-meter radius around the International Space Station. Dragon is now 520 meters away from the International Space Station, and we're now looking for it to exit the approach ellipsoid That's the 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer space around the International Space Station. Everything continuing to go smoothly while Dragon backs further from the International Space Station. Once it exits the approach ellipsoid, Dragon will complete several more departure burns, eventually setting it up into a position to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida, carrying thousands of pounds of research and return cargo. Some of that is critical science experiments, spare parts, and other equipment to be refurbished and returned to the space station at a later date. Once Dragon splashes down tomorrow off the coast of Tallahassee, it will be recovered by the SpaceX recovery team in the splashdown zone. We're now just about 5 minutes away from Dragon departing the approach ellipsoid, which is that mythical cone around the space station referred to as the neighborhood of the space station. At this point, once Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, integrated operations between the flight control team here in Houston and the SpaceX flight control team in Hawthorne will be complete. From there on, SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne will take over operations of the Dragon cargo craft through the remainder of the departure burns and splashdown tomorrow morning. And you're getting a view of SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. Again, following the exit from the approach ellipsoid, they'll be primed for the remainder of Dragon operations through splashdown tomorrow. Dragon is at a range of a little over 800 meters from the International Space Station. And you can see a view of Dragon there on your screen, quite a bit smaller than when we saw it before the loss of signal period. Dragon now approaching a distance of 900 meters from the International Space Station. We're just a couple minutes away from Dragon departing the approach ellipsoid, that 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer zone around the space station. Dragon undocked at 4:05 p.m. Central Time this afternoon while flying off the west coast of Chile. And we are hearing that Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid. Dragon will now be commanded by flight controllers at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, to execute a series of departure burns. That will help slow Dragon down to just over 113 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its descent back through the Earth's atmosphere for a parachute-assisted splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida tomorrow morning. So to recap some of the events from this evening, at 4 p.m. Central Time, flight controllers sent undocking commands to Dragon, and Dragon undocked from Harmony forward. It then completed a series of engine firings to back it away from the International Space Station. It passed through both the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid, and Dragon will continue its journey back to Earth, conducting a series of deorbit burns before its eventual splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida tomorrow, where it will return thousands of pounds of science, research, and investigations for further analysis, as well as other cargo and supplies. So with Dragon now safely on its way back to Earth, carrying over 4,000 pounds of cargo and research with it, that'll wrap up our undocking coverage for today. But there's another cargo vehicle departing Space Station tomorrow, and you can tune in live to watch as Northrop Grumman's 19th Cygnus resupply mission comes to a close. NASA TV coverage will begin at 6:45 a.m. tomorrow morning. But for now, that will do it for us today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Wishing you and yours the happiest holiday season. This is Mission Control Houston.